Hello, John Muchler here, pastor at the Ferndale Alliance Church, and our big idea today is that light is for discovery. Light is for discovery. The Bible says that God is light. It says that Jesus is the light of the world and that we are also lights in this world. I'm going to suggest what is being said there is light is meant to reveal things, and it's meant to reveal God to us. This is different than the view of agnostics and deists and skeptics that will insist that God is not knowable. We would argue that in the beginning God said, "Let there be light." First words ever. Let there be light. It's like he's trying to get our attention and he's telling us, I want you to notice this. I am revealable. You can discover me. You can learn about me. Light is for discovery. We know this in the natural world as well. We use it to study and to observe. If we didn't have light, it would be like we were all living before the Stone Age in a deep, dark, black cave, always black, always dark. We wouldn't even have or need eyes. But we have eyes and we have light so we can see and observe and learn, reveal, judge, compare, measure, and understand. And I think it's the same in the spiritual realm that we are invited to uncover and to reveal and to understand and to learn and make accessible and make immediate, bring close to truth about God Himself. And so I want to go on a little tangent here. Our verse today is Matthew 5:14. Matthew 5:14. You are the light of the world. And the word light is the Greek word phos. That's 3 letters, phi, omega, sigma. That's kind of a PHF sound, an O and an S, phos, which we get the word photograph. So, and I don't think there's any phenomena more studied in the history of mankind than light, by philosophers and scientists and mathematicians and physicists. And again, back in Genesis, God says, His first words, let there be light. And again, I think He's pointing at light and saying, I want you to take note of light. It's really important. First of all, in the natural world, but also in the spiritual realm as well. So I want to talk about light a little bit of science. First, we know that light operates as 2 properties, both as waves and as particles. Think of waves, think of the ocean waves. Somebody plops something in a still lake or a still ocean, and you see waves, and it looks like the water is moving. But it's not moving. It's just going up and down. If a person was in the water, you'd see their head bob up and down, much like a guitar string. When you pluck a guitar string, it has length. Each wave, that would be a single wave, would have length and would have frequency. That would be pitch and music. Up and down it goes, but it's not going anywhere. It does have a wave pattern, but light also acts like particles that are being emanated out at high speeds, very high speed, one constant speed. And so think of like a surfer on one of those waves. He gets on top of a good wave and he is actually moving, although the water underneath him is only going up and down according to amplitude, but he is actually moving. So that's an interesting thing about light. By the way, in part, that makes it possible for us to do something rather amazing, to see through solid things like glass. I'm looking at a piece of glass right now in my camera, and you're looking through glass right now, and it's solid. Touch it, but you can see through it. Stand in front of a window, and you can look outside. You just got to stop for a moment and go, that is totally awesome and amazing. Also, we do not see all of light. Light is part of what's called an electromagnetic spectrum, and we only see a narrow slice of it right in the middle called the visible spectrum. And we see from red and up to blues. On the red end, we have We have a lower frequency but a greater wavelength. A lower frequency but greater wavelength, and everything on that side of the spectrum would be things like radio waves and microwaves and TV waves and things like that. My cell phone is using some of the bandwidth of that lower spectrum, that lower frequency, greater wavelength. That's the infrared, under the red spectrum, that part of the spectrum. On the other end, the blue end or the violet end, we have beyond the violet, beyond the red. We call it ultraviolet. And the frequency is faster, the wavelengths are shorter, and we get things like gamma rays and X-rays. Pretty cool stuff. And by the way, while we're talking about it, how about that human eye? The eye that can see so much of that spectrum in the middle there. You got to admit, that's a masterpiece of creation. The eye is a masterpiece of design, isn't it? And by the way, even though we can only see in that visible spectrum between the red and the blue, we're able to build equipment to see, to be able to detect and to see other parts of the spectrum. We have what we call infrared cameras or infrared glasses. Firefighters use that. They can put these on so when they go into a dark, smoky building, they can discover people that are hidden in there they wouldn't normally be able to see because of infrared glasses. Amazing the things that we're able to do. The main point is that light makes discovery possible. It makes discovery possible. And again, maybe that's why it says of God that He is light. He is discoverable, and He comes to our aid to discover more about Himself and the universe. Perhaps that's also why Jesus is called the light of the world. He comes to reveal to us who God is. And then finally, again, we're called the light of the world because we're designed, we were created, we were born, we were saved to reveal God to other people. Now let's talk a little bit about the speed of light. It's, by the way, spoiler alert, speed of light, how fast is it? It's really fast. It gets its own letter. The letter C standing for celeritas. It's a Latin word, celeritas, which means speed. And scientists have been wondering about the speed of light for a long time. Before that, it was the speed of sound. Can we just do a rabbit trail and talk about the speed of sound? Speed of sound seems pretty fast. You're talking to somebody, it seems rather immediate, but people started to notice that the further you were from someone, that there was a delay in the sound between one person and the other. We now know that sound travels at about 1,000 feet per second. 1,000 feet per second. That's about 750 miles an hour. We thought for a long time you could not travel. Man could not safely travel beyond the speed of sound until old Chuck Yaeger back in 1947 got in a plane and he passed the sound barrier and survived. And by the way, you want to know something about old Chuck? He is still alive. He's 97 years old. Isn't that cool? So sound travels pretty fast, but we can measure it. Again, 1,000 feet per second. By the way, the reason that matters, have you been in a marching band before? My high school years, I was in a marching band. I played an instrument called the French horn, also the mellophone. And if you were on one end of the football field, say at one goalpost, and you had musicians at the other end, and you tried to play at the right time to match them, well, you're hearing them at about 1/3 of a second late. And then, of course, by the time they get your performance, it's another 1/3 of a second. And it's totally counterintuitive, but you're trained in marching band not to listen to the music. You can't do it because there's a delay of maybe a half second or more between different groups on the field. You're trained to play watching the major domo in the middle of the field on the 50-yard line with his baton going up and down, up and down. It's frustrating because you don't hear the music correctly, but you're going to play it and you're trusting that what comes out to the audience is going to work out okay. So anyway, speed of sound's been studied. We know what it is. For a long time, they weren't sure that light had a definable speed. Philosophers like Descartes and Aristotle thought that the speed of light was infinite and was instant, that there wasn't a number you could attach to, that you flipped on a switch and it was instantly at that exact moment everywhere. But there are others that thought that it did have a speed. Galileo, the astronomer, was someone who thought that light had a speed. He came up with a interesting experiment, made sense at the time, that he thought would measure the speed of light. He took a light and he got on a hill, and he had an associate, a partner who got on another hill, maybe a mile or two away, and he also had a light. And the experiment went like this. Galileo would turn on his light, which then signaled his assistant to turn on his light a mile or so later, and then Galileo would time the distance, the amount of time that it took between his turning on his light and then seeing his associate's light. Well, it didn't work very well because light is just way, way too fast. It wasn't until this guy, interesting guy, Danish guy, about 350 years ago, his name was Ole Romer. Ole was trying to come up with a celestial clock to help ships to navigate at sea using the moons of Jupiter kind of as a clock. See, the moons of Jupiter, and they could see Jupiter at that time. They could measure the amount of time it took the moons of Jupiter, like Europa or Io, to go across the face of Jupiter or go be eclipsed along the backside of Jupiter. That was a fixed amount of time, they thought. So Romer was measuring the time that it took for a Jupiter eclipse of one of the moons of Jupiter, and it should be a constant, but it wasn't by his measurements. And he speculated that because the Earth traveled different in relationship to Jupiter, different distances, that the further the Earth was from Jupiter, it would take longer to observe this eclipse. Again, when the moon went behind Jupiter and then came out, it's a greater length of time for the light to travel, and so the eclipse would appear to be longer. And he was right about that. It was about a 20-minute difference. And so another person with a little bit more math skills figured it out, and it wasn't that hard with mathematics. You could do it yourself. He calculated that he knew that the greatest difference in distances between the Earth and Jupiter would be the exact diameter of the Earth's orbit. The Earth's orbit around the sun, whatever that radius is, double it, you have the diameter. That's the furthest distance that you'd have, difference in distance between close and far. And it'd be about 20 minutes. You do some quick math there. And they did, and they came up with this amazing number. They came up with 140,000 miles per second as the speed. That's a pretty good guess. I actually did it myself on my calculator. I came up with about 155,000 miles per second using that same formula. And guess what the real answer is? And this is one of those weird numbers that I memorized a long time ago. The speed of light is 186,282 miles per second. 186,282 miles per second. Romer guessed about 140,000. That was pretty close. And by the way, before I forget, a quick shout out. One of my favorite Facebook pages is Waco, WACO. Stands for Wacom Association of Celestial Observers, and nearly every month on a clear evening down at Boulevard Park, they come out with their really fancy, expensive telescopes to share with the public. And I've taken my kids down there on more than one occasion. We've seen details of the moon's craters, Saturn's rings, and also we've seen these moons, these same moons that Romer saw of Jupiter. So light travels really, really fast, but it does have a fixed amount of time. It's a constant time. And that means something kind of interesting to us. It means that anything that we look at with our eyes, it depends, of course, upon the reflection of light coming back to us. We're actually looking at that item in the past. Objects that are of certain distances, say the sun. When we look at the sun, we're not looking at the sun as it is this moment. It's about 8 minutes old when we look at it. How about Jupiter itself? You get out there in a telescope, you look at Jupiter, you're actually looking at Jupiter 40 minutes ago. Now here's some other interesting thoughts I find fascinating. The closest star to us is Alpha Centauri A and B, kind of twin stars in the Alpha Centauri galaxy. The same Alpha Centauri that the Will Robertson family is trying to get to and lost in space. When we look at that at night, we are looking at it as it was 4.3 light years ago. That means 4.3 light years, that's the distance that light travels in over 4 years. It happens to be about 26 trillion miles. So we look at that star system, it's over 4 years old. That means we're looking at it at about the time that President Barack Obama was in his final year as president of the United States. Listen, how about the most famous star? The North Star, also called Polaris. It's easy to find. We know it's at the tippy tail of the Little Dipper up there. Very important navigating star because of its position north. We're actually not looking at that star very recently. That star tonight, when you look at the North Star, go look at it. You're actually looking at it in its age of 433 years ago. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at Polaris as it was 433 years ago. So if that star disappeared, say, 10 years ago, we won't even know it till another 423 years. Think about that for a second. 433 years ago. I looked up on the calendar what happened 433 years ago. Oddly enough, it was in that year in 1587 that a bunch of settlers from England were off the coast of North Carolina, and they settled on an island called Roanoke Island. You've heard of Roanoke Island? About 115 English settled there, disappeared. It's the mystery of Roanoke Island. We have no idea where they went, but they got there at the same time that first particle of light was being emanated from the North Star, and we now see it today. Pretty cool stuff. So speed of light is really fast. It's so fast that I can call the furthest place on planet Earth from where I am right here, right now. And by the way, I looked at, there's a website that will tell you the city that's the furthest distance from me. It happens to be Umlazi, South Africa, over 10,000 miles away. But light is so fast and electromagnetic waves are so fast, I can make a phone call and speak nearly instantaneously with the people in Africa. So let's wrap this up now. We are not discovering and learning about the nature and application and certainly the uses of light. It's amazing how we use light. Again, just the cell phone that you're looking at right now or using right now depends upon the science and study of light. And light itself makes our world discoverable. And I think light, in a sense, in a spiritual sense, makes God discoverable. He has chosen to make himself discoverable, knowable to us through Jesus Christ and then through one another as we are lights of this world. We are the light of the world. Our calling, our purpose, our mission is to help others to discover him as well. And I want to close with this great quote. We are designed not just to know him, but to want to know him. It's part of our nature. And it's Blaise Pascal who famously said that there is a God-shaped heart in each and every one of us that cannot be satisfied by any created thing, but only by God, the Creator, made known through Jesus Christ. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day.